Good morning, everyone. What if I told you that the very thing keeping you safe is also keeping you stuck? That the walls you've built around your heart aren't just blocking out pain, but also love, connection, and the life you truly deserve. We don't run from love because we don't want it. We run because we fear it. We fear being seen. We fear being vulnerable. And most of all, we fear being hurt. Today, we're going to rip off the mask, face those hidden fears, and break free from the chains of avoidance. Somewhere along the way, you learned that distance equals safety. Maybe it was a broken trust, maybe it was a childhood wound, or maybe it was just life teaching you the wrong lesson. So you keep people at arm's length. You downplay your emotions. You convince yourself you don't need anyone. But deep inside, there's a part of you screaming for connection, for love, for real intimacy. The truth? Avoidance is just fear dressed up as control. But let me ask you, has it really given you control? Or has it left you feeling lonely, misunderstood, and disconnected? The good news is you can change this because fear isn't real. It's a story. And just like any story, you have the power to rewrite it. Right now, I want you to do something. Close your eyes and imagine a future where you let love in. A future where you trust. A future where you no longer let the past define you. That future exists, and it starts with one decision. The decision to stop running. Because real strength, real freedom, it comes from facing what scares you. It comes from stepping into discomfort. It comes from choosing connection over. So the question is, will you keep running or will you step up, break free, and finally allow yourself to love and be loved? The choice is yours. And your heart, it's waiting. Avoidance is often mistaken for control. We tell ourselves that keeping people at a distance means we are in charge of our emotions, that we decide who gets close and who doesn't. It feels like power. It feels like protection. But in reality, avoidance is not strength. It's fear in disguise. It's a defense mechanism that tricks us into believing we are safe, when in fact we are just shielding ourselves from the very things that make life rich and meaningful: love, trust, and connection. The reason avoidance feels so natural is because it often stems from deep-seated pain. Somewhere along the way you were hurt. Maybe you trusted someone who let you down. Maybe you opened your heart only to have it broken. Maybe you grew up in an environment where emotions were dismissed, where vulnerability was seen as weakness. Over time, you learned a lesson. Letting people in leads to pain, so it's better to stay guarded. You started believing that distance was the answer, that if you never let anyone too close, they could never hurt you. But here's the problem. While you might avoid pain, you also avoid love. You avoid connection. You avoid the very experiences that bring fulfillment. You convince yourself that you don't need deep relationships, that you are better off alone. You stay on the surface, keeping interactions light and easy, never fully allowing yourself to be seen. And at first, this feels like a win. You feel untouchable. You think you've mastered control. But eventually the cracks start to show. Because no matter how much you try to push people away, the human heart is wired for connection. You start to feel the weight of loneliness, even if you don't admit it. You watch others build deep, meaningful relationships and wonder why you feel so disconnected. And deep inside, there's a voice whispering the truth. Avoidance isn't protecting you, it's trapping you. The reality is, avoidance is not freedom. It's a cage, a self-imposed prison where you lock yourself away from the possibility of being hurt, but also from the possibility of experiencing true love and fulfillment. You may believe you are in control, but in reality, fear is the one calling the shots. And as long as fear is in control, you will never fully live, love, or experience the depth of connection that you are meant for. The root of avoidance is unresolved pain. People don't wake up one day and decide to shut themselves off from connection. It happens gradually, often without realizing it, as a response to experiences that left wounds too deep to face. Pain, especially emotional pain, is not something the mind forgets easily. When someone has been hurt, whether through betrayal, neglect, rejection, or loss, the brain registers it as a threat, something to be avoided at all costs. Over time, this conditioning shapes behavior, convincing a person that distance is the safest way to exist. Avoidance doesn't come from a lack of desire for connection. It comes from a fear of experiencing the same hurt again. A child who grows up feeling emotionally neglected may learn that expressing feelings leads to disappointment. A person who once loved deeply and was abandoned may believe that attachment only leads to suffering. A betrayal by a close friend or partner can teach the lesson that trust is dangerous. The subconscious mind, designed to protect, absorbs these experiences and forms a defense. Don't get too close. Don't rely on anyone. Don't let them see the real you. The wounds stay buried, but their effects play out in everyday life, creating patterns of avoidance that seem logical, but are in truth driven by unhealed pain. The biggest challenge with avoidance is that it often goes unnoticed by the person experiencing it. It feels natural to keep relationships superficial, to avoid deep conversations, or to downplay emotions. The mind rationalizes this behavior, saying, I'm just independent, or I don't need anyone, when in reality it's an invisible shield protecting a fragile heart. The pain never truly disappears, it just hides beneath layers of emotional distance. And because it remains unresolved, it continues to influence decisions, relationships, and even self-perception. But avoiding pain doesn't mean healing from it. In fact, the more it is ignored, the more power it holds. The fear of being hurt again dictates actions, limiting the ability to trust, love, and fully engage with life. It creates a cycle where opportunities for genuine connection are sabotaged before they even begin. Relationships suffer not because they are inherently flawed, but because the past is still shaping the present. The very thing that once caused suffering is still in control, not because it is actively present, but because it was never truly faced, understood, or released. Fear is a story, not a fact. The mind is a master storyteller, shaping our perceptions of reality based on past experiences, emotions, and deeply ingrained beliefs. When fear takes root, it doesn't just warn us of potential dangers, it creates entire narratives that dictate how we see the world, how we interact with others, and how we define ourselves. These stories feel real because they are reinforced by emotions, but that doesn't mean they are true. Think about it. A child who experiences rejection may grow up believing they are unworthy of love. A person who once faced betrayal may convince themselves that trusting others is foolish. Someone who has been abandoned may adopt the belief that if they let anyone get too close, they will inevitably be left behind. These stories don't just shape thoughts, they shape actions. They determine how a person navigates relationships, whether they take risks, and how they respond to moments of vulnerability. Over time, the stories become so deeply ingrained that they feel like facts. I'm not lovable. People always leave. If I show weakness, I'll get hurt. These statements are not realities, but they feel like absolute truths because the mind has repeated them over and over again. The problem with fear-based stories is that they are self-fulfilling. When someone believes they are unworthy of love, they subconsciously push people away, reinforcing their belief. When someone fears abandonment, they may become distant or emotionally unavailable, creating the very disconnection they were trying to avoid. When trust is seen as a risk, relationships remain surface level, never reaching the depth that leads to real connection. The mind, in an attempt to protect, ends up creating exactly what it feared. But just because a story has been told for years doesn't mean it has to define the future. The most powerful realization anyone can have is that these narratives are not set in stone. They were created by past experiences, and just as they were written, they can be rewritten. The moment a person challenges the beliefs that have held them back, they open the door to new possibility. They begin to see that the past is not a prophecy and fear is not an absolute truth. The key is recognizing that fear does not reflect reality. It only reflects perception. And perception can change the moment a person decides to write a new story. One built not on avoidance, but on courage, trust, and the willingness to embrace life fully. Connection requires courage because it demands that we step outside our comfort zones and embrace vulnerability. It is easy to stay guarded, to build walls, and to convince ourselves that we don't need anyone. But deep down, every human being craves connection, love, and belonging. The problem is that connection comes with uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers fear. What if we open up and get rejected? What if we trust someone and they let us down? What if we allow ourselves to love and end up heartbroken? These are the fears that keep people locked in avoidance. But the truth is, real fulfillment lies on the other side of that fear. Avoiding connection might feel like control, but it is actually a form of self-sabotage. When we keep people at arm's length, we are not protecting ourselves, we are depriving ourselves of one of the most fundamental human experiences. Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, thrive on trust, vulnerability, and emotional openness. But all of these things require courage. They require a willingness to step into discomfort, to embrace uncertainty, and to take risks without any guarantee of the outcome. That is why so many people choose to avoid deep connection. It feels safer to stay detached than to face the possibility of pain. Yet the irony is that avoidance does not eliminate pain, it creates a different kind of suffering. The loneliness of keeping everyone at a distance, the emptiness of shallow relationships, the frustration of feeling misunderstood, these are all consequences of choosing protection over connection. True connection requires taking the risk to be seen, to be known, and to be accepted, not just for the parts we show the world, but for everything we are. The strongest people are not the ones who avoid emotional risks, but the ones who embrace them despite the fear. It takes real strength to trust after experiencing betrayal, to love after heartbreak, and to open up after years of shutting people out. But that is where growth happens. That is where life becomes meaningful. The most fulfilling relationships are not built on perfection. They are built on the willingness to show up fully, flaws and all, and still choose connection over fear. When we have the courage to do that, we don't just find love and belonging, we find true freedom. Because in the end, connection is not just about being with others. It is about being fully alive. You have the power to change. No matter how long you have lived with avoidance, no matter how deeply rooted your fears are, and no matter how many times you have convinced yourself that keeping your heart guarded is the only way to stay safe, change is always possible. The mind loves familiarity, even when it is painful. It clings to old patterns because they feel predictable, and predictability feels like security. But just because something feels familiar does not mean it is right. And just because you have lived a certain way does not mean you have to continue down that path. Change begins the moment you realize that your past does not have to dictate your future. The way you have learned to protect yourself through distance, detachment, and emotional walls was a response to experiences that hurt you. But those experiences are not happening anymore. They are memories. And memories only have power over you if you keep reliving them. Every day, every moment, you have a choice to continue living in the patterns that keep you stuck or to break free and create something new. The first step to change is awareness. You cannot fix what you do not acknowledge. If you recognize that avoidance has been shaping your relationships, that fear has been guiding your decisions, and that emotional distance has been limiting your ability to connect, then you have already taken the most important step. The next step is deciding what kind of life you truly want to live. Do you want to remain trapped in avoidance, never experiencing the depth of love, trust, and connection? Or do you want to take the risk of opening up, embracing vulnerability, and allowing yourself to feel fully alive? Change is uncomfortable because it requires stepping into the unknown. It means challenging the thoughts and beliefs that have controlled you for years. It means facing your fears instead of running from them. But every transformation begins with discomfort, and every breakthrough happens when you push past the resistance. You do not have to be perfect to start. You do not have to have all the answers. You only need the willingness to try, the courage to take one step, then another, and then another. And with each step, you prove to yourself that you are not bound by the past. You are capable of change. You are worthy of love, and you have the power to create the life you truly deserve. So now the choice is in your hands. Will you continue to let fear dictate your life, keeping love, trust, and connection at a distance? Or will you decide right here, right now, that you are no longer a prisoner of your past? You have the power to break free. You have the strength to rewrite your story. And most importantly, you have the right to experience deep, meaningful, and fulfilling relationships. Yes, stepping into vulnerability takes courage. Yes, facing the unknown is uncomfortable. But what's even more uncomfortable? Living a life where you never allow yourself to truly feel, love, and connect. You are not here to live in fear. You are here to live fully, to love fearlessly, to embrace connection even when it feels uncertain. Because the greatest risk is not opening your heart. It's spending a lifetime wondering what could have been if you had. So stand tall, take the leap, and show yourself what's possible when you finally stop running and start living.